All right, let's dive into an idea that might completely change how you think about, well, the way you think. It's this concept called the intellectual burden of the isolated mind, and it all kicks off with a question I bet is going to feel very, very familiar. You know that feeling when you get stuck in a mental loop, just replaying one single conversation over and over and over again? Yeah? Well, you are definitely not alone, and the reason why is actually way more interesting than just chalking it up to overthinking. So let's start with what this actually feels like. We can call it the overthinking feedback loop. You know, that endless mental treadmill you just can't seem to get off of. This is it, right? You're analyzing every single word, you're scrutinizing every little pause, you dissect every tiny shift in their tone of voice. You're hunting for some hidden meaning, something you might have missed. And honestly, it is exhausting. But here's a totally different way to look at it. What if this isn't a flaw? What if we just flipped the script on his whole experience and saw it through a new lens? Let's call it your brain's supercomputer. So take a look at this because this is where it gets really fascinating. On the left, that's what it feels like. Chronic overthinking, social anxiety, all that confusion and self-doubt. But look at the right. That's what might actually be happening under the hood. Deep pattern recognition, processing a ton of social variables, and running these incredibly complex scenario simulations in your head. So here's the absolute key takeaway. This is not a bug in your system. It's not a defect. It's your brain's processor. This powerful cognitive engine just running at full speed. It's a feature, not a flaw. But where did this feature even come from? Well, the psychological root is something called rejection sensitivity. It's a trait that often develops when you're young, when you learn to become hyper aware of all these subtle cues, a tiny shift in someone's tone, a blink and you miss it facial expression, as a way to predict and protect yourself from being ignored or left out. So where does a sensitivity like that even start? That brings us right to the emotional core of it all, which is the sting of rejection. The source material for this whole idea really just it nails this feeling with one single powerful phrase, the pain of being never the first choice. It's that feeling, isn't it, of always being the backup plan, the afterthought. That exact pain is what forges this entire cognitive ability. And you can actually see how that pain gets transformed into a skill, step by step. It all starts with social exclusion. That triggers a heightened awareness of everything going on around you socially. That awareness then trains you to anticipate cues for rejection. And over time, your brain literally evolves into this advanced social supersensor. Think of it like this. Your mind basically learned to become a weather station for your social life. It's just constantly scanning the horizon, not for clouds, but for the absolute earliest, faintest signs of an emotional storm. It's trying to predict it long before it ever hits. Okay, so what happens when this incredibly powerful analytical mind, one that was forged in the pain of exclusion, becomes a core part of your identity? Well, it creates what we're calling the self-reliant outsider. Does any of this start to sound familiar? This is someone who doesn't really need praise from others to feel validated. They tend to navigate the world independently, and they often find real comfort and clarity in being alone. And because of all that constant analysis, they have this deep, almost intuitive understanding of social dynamics. They learn to trust their own pattern recognition above anything else. At the end of the day, it all boils down to this one fundamental lesson, a lesson learned the hard way. You learned that the safest, most reliable, most predictable person you could ever count on was yourself. And this brings us right to the core paradox of this whole experience. As we're about to see, it is both a burden and a strength. Let's just break that down. The burden is real. There's no denying it. Social isolation, that feeling of analysis paralysis, and the emotional pain that kicked the whole thing off. But look at the strength that was forged in that fire. That social isolation created true self-reliance. That emotional pain calibrated an incredibly high-fidelity perception. And that analysis paralysis, that's the side effect of possessing incredibly deep insight. And that is the final big idea here. The very same cognitive engine that can make you feel so isolated and alone is precisely what gives you such a rare and unique depth of understanding. They're just two sides of the exact same coin. So I'm going to leave you with this to think about. After everything we've just unpacked, what if your greatest burden is also your most unique gift.